Hello and welcome back to the Bookshelf Odyssey. My name is Art. Today we're going to be finally wrapping up 2023. It's been a while since I've recorded something. I just needed some time off from making videos, so I thought January was a perfect time for that. On top of a little bit of a break I got, I was able to get in lots of good reading time because Mother Nature did her best to try to kill us all. Over the course of about 2 weeks in January here in Iowa, we had about 3 to 4 snowstorms. I can't even remember now. It was a lot. So much snow, so much ice. And then when that was all done, the weather just plummeted down to about minus 35 degrees Fahrenheit. I kid you not. It was freezing cold. And my lovely little dog, she wanted to go out and play in the snow, play in the snowstorm, but she didn't care. She just wanted to go outside and chase squirrels. Well, it turns out even squirrels don't want to be out in 35 below zero weather. So we had to have a little bit of a difference of opinion, I think. But today is February 1st. I don't know when this video will come out, but believe it or not, I have my window open. It is in the low 50s today. The sun is shining. The snow is almost melted. And it feels like spring out there. This weather is a little more, I prefer a little bit better than, when there's just no heat anywhere. But now I feel rested. I'm dug myself out of my igloo and I'm ready to talk to you about the books I read and my reading in 2023. What I have is 23 questions of my reading from 2023. And I got these questions from the Nerdy Narrative, from her Leslie's channel, the Nerdy Narrative. And I don't know if I can't remember if they were original with her or not, but I like these questions. And I think every year she adds a new one or somebody adds a new one. And I thought this would be a great way to go through what I read this year. So without any further ado, let's remember the year that was. Question 1, how many books did you read this year? I read 211 books. Now, before you panic or gasp or collapse in a fit of anger or whatever your response might be to that number, you need to know that about 120 of those books were audiobooks. I am an audiobook fanatic. I love them. I love being read a story. Maybe I have unresolved issues with my mother. Well, I do, but I didn't get read to enough as a child, and that's why I'm so obsessive over audiobooks. Who knows? But I love being read a story, so that was a really enjoyable part of my year. I will listen to them a little bit sped up, depending on the narrator, and I like to listen when I'm walking our dog, when I'm going on hikes, when I'm driving. I do a lot of that. Really, my main hobby is reading, so that's what I spend a lot of my time on. As you can tell, even from my sweatshirt, book nerd, that's me. And then the physical books that I read were, well, you can do the math there. And it was about 90 physical books, and about half of those were on my Kindle, and then the other were, the quote unquote real books. Overall, I'm very happy with that number. Every year I set myself a goal to read just 100 books. And if I make it, I just reset the number higher, or if I don't make it, I reset the number lower. So you might wonder why I even set a goal. I don't know. It's just what I do. So make of that what you will. So yes, every year I meet my reading goal because I constantly change it. And then question 2, what was the first book you read this year? The first book was called Hark the Herald Angels Slay by Vicki Delaney. It's a cozy mystery set in the fictional town of Rudolph, New York. Rudolph, New York is a town that celebrates Christmas year-round, and the main character is Mary Wilkinson. She owns a shop called Mrs. Claus's Treasures. She dresses up like Mrs. Claus and sells handmade gifts and crafts, things like that. Her father is the mayor, or the former mayor of the town. He is the town's official Santa Claus. And dead bodies show up. It's a wonderful series, really good mysteries, and I'd recommend that series to you. Not every book takes place at Christmas. It does take place at different times of the year, and including Christmas. But I love Christmas. If you know me, Christmas is my favorite holiday, my favorite time of year. So That was a fun read. And then question 3, what was your most anticipated read? I'm not really sure because I do look forward to reading quite a few books every year by some of my favorite authors. I even look forward to rereading some of my favorite classics. Like this year, I was really looking forward to rereading The Pickwick Papers by Charles Dickens, which I did and thoroughly enjoyed. This might have been my favorite reading time with it since I first read it. So it just continues to be one of my all-time favorite Dickens stories. But then I was also looking forward to reading Murder at the Pumpkin Pageant by Darcy Hannah. I read the first 3 books in that series a year or two ago, right around the time they were first coming out. I read them all within the space of about a month or two, which I don't usually do. And so I've had to wait for a while to get the new book out because she had just published a 3rd one when I had interviewed her for my podcast. So I've been waiting for book 4 to come out, and it finally came out, and was really excited to get that. And now she has book 5 coming in 2024, which I can't wait to read. Oh, and that book is set at St. Patrick's Day, I believe. Question 4, what was the shortest book that you read? That would be Old Lady Mary by Margaret Oliphant. It's a novella. It was only like 52 pages long. So technically it might be a short story. Essentially, it's a ghost story that is seen from both the human and the ghost's point of view. And the ghost is Lady Mary. She dies and tries to make up for having, as the summary says, she tries to make up for having in life foolishly hid her will. So she hid her will, and then when she dies, nobody can find it. And the story kind of takes off from there. I'm going to start reading through some of Margaret Oliphant's novels. She's been added to my list of authors I want to read through. I have a really long list of authors I want to read all of their stories, but we'll get through it. Question 5, what was the longest book you read? And that would be The Letters of Mrs. Gaskell. It was over 1,000 pages long, and I read them slowly throughout about 6 months or so it took me. And I made some videos about them, reading some of my favorite letters she wrote, talking about some of the things she experienced. The parts that I found to be the most moving were the ones where she was writing about her friend Charlotte Bronte when Charlotte passed away, and just the shock and the grief and the just the sorrow she expresses in her letters, and what this and how she came to end up writing her biography. It was all really interesting and very, very moving. A lovely tribute to her friend. Number 6, what book surprised you the most? Now, this is a book you're going to hear mentioned several times in this video, and that is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. That was a book that my wife had been telling me I needed to read, and she kept telling me over and over again, and I finally decided to read it. Sometimes if you tell me I need to do something, my personality is such that I'll say, I don't need to do that. And this was maybe one of those situations, but I'm so glad that I ended up reading it because it was turned out to be one of the best books I've read this year. Basically, it tells a story of Earth is facing a cataclysmic end-of-life event, and as a kind of a Hail Mary option, they send a man in a spacecraft out to where this event seems to be sourced to try to go and solve the problem so that Earth isn't destroyed. And that's all I'll tell you about the plot. But it's from what I understand, I haven't read The Martian yet, but I hear it's similar to that, where he is given these scientific challenges to overcome. But along the way, the story takes a little twist with a new character that's introduced named Rocky. And if you know, you know, Rocky is the best. That really just improved the story that was already pretty good. Question 7, what was the most disappointing book you read? That would be Camp Austin by Ted Scheinman. I was really looking forward to it based on the way it sounded. He was going to write about his experiences being involved with like the Jane Austen fan clubs, Jane Austen Society of North America, maybe something like that. But really, he came across sounding very, almost a little bit arrogant. He kind of complained a lot and didn't really ever seem comfortable in that setting, which is fine. Maybe I blame more the marketing for the book than the actual book, but That was a bit of a disappointment. It wasn't quite what I was expecting or wanting. Question 8, what book exceeded your expectations? Again, that would be Project Hail Mary. I wasn't quite sure I would like it. I've been having a lot of misses more than hits with science fiction lately. Just everything about it is what I love about science fiction. It's a story of exploration. It's a story of friendship. There really isn't an antagonist other than the event they're trying to solve. And so it was so good, guys. It was so good. I'm actually wanting to reread it right now. And then question 9, what author did you read the most of this year? I would probably guess Dickens. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think I read about 4 or 5 books by him. A couple were rereads. Then I read some of his shorter short story collections that he had published at Christmas time. And of course, I read A Christmas Carol. And then question 10, if you could recommend one book this year to your subscribers, what would it be? Well, it definitely would be Project Hail Mary. That's the book I'm promoting this year. But the cozy mysteries I've read that I've mentioned too, Vicki Delaney's series, Liz Ireland's series, Darcy Hannah's series, those are probably my 3 favorite cozy mysteries right now. And of course, if you haven't read the classics, Dickens, Gaskell, get reading. Good stuff. Question 11, what are your top 3 or 5 favorite book covers from books read this year? I don't know if I really have any favorite book covers. I mean, I love good cover art. I don't know if any really stick out. And then top 3 or 5 favorite new to me authors. So I'll share 3. Of course, Andy Weir. I've mentioned I enjoyed his books so much. I'm going to be reading The Martian and anything else he's written. I'm going to try to read some of his back catalog. And then an author team, their names are Ada Bright and Cass Grafton. They wrote The Particular Charm of Miss Jane Austen, and then the sequel, which I believe is called The Unexpected History of Miss Jane Austen, or The Unexpected Past of Miss Jane Austen. I can't remember. But anyway, basically the premise is Jane Austen time travels to the future, and she appears, I believe she appears in Bath, in England. You got to imagine the impact or the shock it must have been to arrive and see all these museums and places dedicated to her. She's brought forward from before she became an author, and just the experiences she has, the people she meets, the adventures. There's a lot of time travel shenanigans that happen. I love time travel as a plot device, and so this story was really a lot of fun, celebrating both those time travel tropes as well as Jane Austen. And there's just a really beautiful scene at the end of the first book that the main character is walking through the Jane Austen Museum, having met Jane Austen, and just thinking about and experiencing the impact that one writer can have, not just on history, but on us personally. It's really beautifully written, and was one of my favorite books this year. And then another new one is Jan Caron. She writes the Mitford series, and I just read the first book of that series this year and really enjoyed it. It was a very cozy read, and I'm going to continue in that series this year. Question 13, favorite book of this year? Well, if you haven't guessed by now, it's Project Hail Mary, then you must have skipped parts of my video. But excellent book. It's definitely my favorite. And then favorite series you started this year but did not finish. There have been several, as I mentioned, the Mitford series. But one that really has me intrigued is called the Bobaverse series. There's 4 books out so far. The first one is called We Are Legion, We Are Bob, and it's a science fiction story. It's written by Dennis E. Taylor, and basically Bob is I think he's an insurance salesman or something. He sells his company. He gets rich. He signs up to have his body cryo preserved after he dies, and then he promptly goes out and gets hit by a car and dies. And then that's right, all in the first chapter or 2 of the story. And then he wakes up years and years later, and they've downloaded his consciousness into a computer, which they then put into a spaceship and launch into space. It's a delightful story, especially when Bob begins to make copies of himself, who then go on to develop their own personality, their own names, And I've read the second book also, and by then he's got a whole, fleet of Bobs at his disposal. Some of them have some pop culture references. One of his computer interface that he talks to looks like Admiral Akbar. One of the Bobs are named Homer Simpson or Homer. There's another one named Riker. There's some Star Trek references. It's great. It's a lot of fun with some really intriguing science fiction type stories involved in it. There's space exploration. There's debates over what would be considered the prime directive in Star Trek. Should we interfere in the growth of a planet's life or not? Things like that. I'm really looking forward to seeing where this series goes. And the titles are great. So question 15, a favorite new character this year? Well, that would be Rocky from Project Hail Mary. And then also the original Bob in the Bobaverse books. As I mentioned, he keeps making copies of himself, but all of them are great. But I just went with original Bob. Question 16, favorite new release this year? I believe I mentioned already Mrs. Claus and the Trouble with Turkeys, and then Murder at the Pumpkin Pageant. But a couple nonfiction I really enjoyed. One is There Are No Stupid Questions in Science, and that's a book where she's a scientist. I've had her on my podcast, and she basically answers some of the most frequently asked questions about science, but she does it in a way that's funny and entertaining, but also really intelligently done too. I felt smarter for just having read the book. So read the book. If for no other reason, you'll find out why men have nipples. Okay. And then another nonfiction I really enjoyed was called Making It So by Patrick Stewart. I am a huge Trekkie. I love Star Trek and I love Star Wars. Those are probably my two favorite science fiction franchises. And I loved hearing his journey to becoming an actor. He wrote with such compassion and empathy. He wrote with genuine regret over mistakes that he's made and things that he wishes he could go and do differently. And I think part of what enhanced the story so much is I listened to it on audiobook, and Sir Patrick Stewart narrates his story, and it's just so well done. You hear probably more detail about his life growing up and his early years performing Shakespeare on stage, which was extremely fascinating. I would love to hear more stories about his time with Star Trek and different things, but the time period he chose to spend a lot of his time talking about was, I think, the right choice, because it ends up not just being a fluffy pop culture story, but a really in-depth look at his life, the difficult past that he grew up out of, how that affected him, and as I mentioned, mistakes that he's made, but also the things he's learned along the way. Just absolutely delightful. Number 17 is your favorite reread of the year. That would be Pickwick Papers by Dickens. It's his first novel, so a great place to begin if you want to read through Dickens. It's a chunker, but it's one of his novels that I find I enjoy. The more I read it, the more I'm able to get out of it. And of course, I always love rereading A Christmas Carol every year, and this year was no exception. Number 18. What was the last book you read this year? That would be Mrs. Lirriper's Legacy by Charles Dickens, and it's a sequel to Mrs. Lirriper's Lodgings. And these are two collections of short stories. They're anthologies, so other writers have added to it. And this is what Dickens would publish during the Christmas season after he wrote some of his Christmas novellas and kind of burned out on that. So he would have other authors write in stories. He'd collect them in a magazine for that month's issue, for Christmas issue. And then he would bookend the story with a short story, basically. So what we have is Mrs. Lirriper, who owns a lodging house, not really a hotel, but like an apartment building. And these are some of the stories that her tenants would tell and different reasons why they were telling stories. And so there's a connecting storyline through this. You can read this, like the opening and closing chapter, and not read any of the other little stories in the middle, and just be fine because it's one whole story. But you're going to miss out on some really charming little Victorian short stories. So don't miss out on that. Then my question 19, favorite series finished this year. And I haven't really finished any, but I did get caught up on a couple, like Mrs. Claus and the Beacon Bake Shop series. Only they went and have a couple more books coming out this year, so I got to get caught up again. Question 20, favorite short story this year. That would be The Haunted House by Juno Jacob. And it sounds like a scary story, but it's actually a really sweet story. It's in his collection called Autumn Nights, and it's a story that celebrates imagination, as well as it shows the importance of leaving behind stories for the next generation that will help inspire them, help them to, grow their imagination. It's a short story, so if I give too many plot details away, you pretty much tell the whole story. But it's really well worth the read, and it's beautifully written by Juno Jacob, who's a man who is writing with the spirit of Ray Bradbury looking over his shoulder. Just a fantastic collection. Number 22, what is your least favorite book cover of the year? I don't really have a least favorite. I liked them all. I didn't hate any. So I tend to be turned off a book if the book cover is really bad, So I don't know if that makes me shallow or not, but I like to read pretty books. What can I say? Oops, I missed one. Number 21, what was your favorite short story collection? And so that was Autumn Nights by Juno Jacob. I just mentioned that. All right, and then number 23, what was your favorite anthology released or read this year? It was one I read this year. It was called Wolfsbane and Mistletoe. I got that off of Audible, and it was a collection of Christmas short stories that featured werewolves. I know it was about as fun as that sounds. A wide variety of authors are represented there, and each story kind of follows that same theme. And I was kind of surprised it didn't. I thought maybe I would get tired of it. Would feel like repetitious, but it never did. It was very engaging. All right, so that's my year 2023 wrapped up for you. I'm already well off on my TBR list for 2024, and January was a great reading month. So what's coming up? Well, I've got my podcast, the Bookshelf Odyssey podcast, that will be resuming. I have an episode coming out probably on Thursday that I recorded before my break, and I'll be interviewing cozy mystery writer Jessica Thompson. She'll be back on my show, and we're going to be talking about Agatha Christie. So if you love Agatha Christie, stay tuned. We just gush about Christie for like an hour. It was a lot of fun. Jessica also has a new book coming out. We'll talk a little bit about her new book as well. And then I'm hoping to begin to catch up on my tag videos. I've been tagged in several I need to get to. And I want to try to figure out doing like reading wrap-up type videos. I need to find a plan that works for me. I'm trying to be careful not to plan too many things because I have this habit of making plans and then things come up that delay my plans. I hope to come back and talk more about Ray Bradbury and some of his short stories that are collected in The Dark Carnival, but that's something you can look forward to. I have some thoughts on doing some reviews on some of my favorite classics and Victorian classics and some of my favorite Victorian writers. So keep an eye out for that. But overall, I'm just going to continue to kind of make videos how and when I feel like it. But so make sure you subscribe to this channel so you don't miss out on any. And so that'll be it for me today. And until next time, happy reading. Take care.